The phrase beach workout usually conjures up one of two very specific images.
Hmm.
Either it's a montage from a Rocky movie, looking cool, splashing in the surf, racing Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
Or if you've actually done one, it's that visceral memory of your lungs burning and your legs just feeling like they've been encased in concrete.
Oh, yeah. Heavy legs are definitely the defining feature of sand training.
Exactly. It's universally accepted as hard work. But in the world of sports science, hard doesn't always equal smart. We're obsessed with efficiency.
Of course.
So the question we're asking today is, does that misery actually translate to better performance when you step back onto the grass? Or are you just suffering for the scenery?
It's the classic debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Specificity versus overload. And to answer it, we are doing a deep dive into a very specific, very robust study.
Well, lay on us.
It's titled Comparative Effects of Sand and Grass-Based Repeated Sprint Training on Aerobic and Anaerobic Performance in Soccer Players.
Yeah, a bit of a mouthful, but a very, very cool paper. This is the work of Haiting, Zhai, Tingting Wang, Duchun Wang, and Hongwen.
And for those of you who want to dig into the primary source later, this was published in the Journal of Sport Science and Medicine. That's Volume 25, pages 327 through 338, released in June 2026.
What I love about this paper is that it doesn't just ask, does it work? It asks, how does the surface change the biology? Because soccer, or football, depending on where you're listening, is such a physiological paradox.
It really is unique. I mean, if
Yeah.
you look at the demands of the modern game, a midfielder might cover anywhere from, 9 to 13 kilometers in a single match?
That's endurance territory.
Totally. That's aerobic capacity. You need a massive engine just to survive the game.
Right. But you can jog around for 80 minutes, but the game isn't decided by jogging. It's decided by those split-second moments.
Exactly.
The 30-meter sprint to a through ball or that vertical jump for a header against a center back.
Which is purely anaerobic power. And historically, those two systems, aerobic endurance and anaerobic power, they are very difficult to train at the same time.
They sort of compete for resources, right?
They do. If you run too much distance to build the engine, you lose your pop. If you only lift heavy and sprint short, you gas out in the 60th minute.
It's the classic coach's dilemma. How do you build a hybrid athlete without just breaking them?
Exactly. And so the mission of this study was to see if they could use the ground itself, the physical instability of sand, to hack that equation.
To get more bang for your buck, basically.
Pretty much, to get more power and endurance out of the same workout just by changing the terrain.
Specifically using high-intensity interval training, or HIAT, they wanted to see if the surface acts as a force multiplier for the training adaptations. So let's get into the setup.
Okay.
Because the validity of any study lives and dies by who they tested. We aren't looking at weekend warriors here.
No, and that is a crucial point. They recruited 42 male collegiate soccer players. These weren't beginners. They had, I think, about 9 years of training experience on average.
So they were already fit.
Very fit. Experienced athletes. You can't just throw a beginner on sand and measure the improvement because, well, beginners improve at everything no matter what they do.
The famous newbie gains. You could have them run backward uphill and they'd get faster.
Precisely. With experienced athletes, moving the needle is much, much harder. So they split these 42 players randomly into 3 groups.
Okay.
A sand group, a grass group, and a control group.
And the control group wasn't just sitting on the couch playing video games, right?
No, and I'm glad you caught that. That's important. The control group continued with standard technical soccer, training, passing, drills, that kind of thing, matched for the same duration.
So it isolates the variable.
It totally isolates the variable.
Yeah.
If the sprint groups improve, we know it's because of the specific sprinting, not just because they were exercising more.
Okay, so we have the players. Now, what was the protocol? What did they have to do?
It was intense. The whole thing lasted for 6 weeks. Twice a week, the sand and grass groups would do their sprint workouts.
And the workout was?
It was 3 sets of 6 maximum effort sprints.
Wait, let me visualize this. 6 sprints per set. How long was each sprint?
30 meters. So it's a short, sharp burst. But here's the kicker.
Uh-oh.
They only got 30 seconds of rest between each sprint.
Ouch. 30 seconds is barely enough time to walk back to the start line and take a breath. You're definitely not fully recovering.
And that's by design. They're forcing the body to operate under, high accumulation of metabolic waste. They want you to fatigue.
And then between sets?
4 minutes of rest. So
Yep.
enough to flush some of that out before you go again.
Okay, so physiologically, they're hammering the system. But mechanically, the sand group and the grass group are doing 2 totally different workouts because of the physics of the surface.
This is where the study gets really technical in a fascinating way. The researchers didn't just rely on the feeling that sand is soft.
Right, they had to measure it.
They did. They actually measured the stiffness of the surfaces using a device called a Clegg impact hammer.
A Clegg impact hammer, that sounds like a finishing move in professional wrestling.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually a standardized engineering tool. You drop a weight from a set height and measure how quickly it stops upon impact.
It gives you a number.
It gives you a number. And what they found quantitatively was that the grass surface was approximately 2.98 times stiffer than the sand.
Wow, almost 3 times stiffer. That is a massive difference in mechanics.
It is. And think about what that means for energy. When you run on a stiff surface like firm grass or a track, the ground pushes back at you.
Yeah?
You land, your tendons, especially the Achilles, they stretch like rubber bands, and then they snap back to help propel you forward. That is what we call the stretch shortening cycle.
Right, it's elastic recoil, you're bouncing, it's like free energy.
Correct. Now, contrast that with sand. Sand has high compliance, and it's unstable. So when you push into it, the sand grains just shift and displace.
The floor gives way beneath you.
Exactly. So instead of stretching that rubber band, the energy just dissipates into the ground. The sand absorbs the force. It's an energy thief.
Which means if you want to move forward, you can't rely on the bounce. You have to generate all the force yourself.
Precisely. You have to rely on what's called concentric muscle action. You are manually pushing your body weight through the sand with every single step.
It's the difference between jumping on a trampoline versus jumping on a mattress.
That is the perfect analogy. And that lack of energy return is what drives the really fascinating results of this study.
Okay, let's get to those results. I want to start with the jumping, because this was the first big aha moment for me reading this paper.
Yes, the vertical jump tests. So they measured 2 types of jumps, the squat jump and the counter movement jump.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, a counter movement jump is what we normally think of. You dip down and immediately explode up. It uses that elastic stretch shortening cycle we just talked about.
Right, the dip is the rubber band stretching.
Exactly. But a squat jump is different. You squat down, you pause at the bottom for 3 seconds to kill all that momentum and elastic energy, and then you jump.
So it's pure power from a dead stop.
It's pure concentric power. It measures how much force your muscles can generate without any help from the bounce.
So what happened after 6 weeks of this?
Well, both the sand and grass groups improved their jumps compared to the control group. Sprinting makes you explosive, that's no surprise. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, the sand group showed significantly greater improvements in the squat jump compared to the grass group.
That seems counterintuitive at first. You'd think the faster surface, the grass, would train you to be more explosive.
It does seem that way, but it makes perfect sense when you look at the motor unit recruitment. Because the sand group couldn't use their tendons to help them sprint.
They couldn't bounce.
They couldn't bounce. So their nervous system had to learn to fire more muscle fibers and fire them harder just to get moving. They were essentially doing high-resistance concentric training with every single step.
They were basically doing thousands of reps of concentric focus resistance training disguised as running.
Correct. The nervous system had to adapt to recruit more muscle just to overcome the surface. That adaptation transferred directly to the squat jump.
That is fascinating. So if you're an athlete who struggles with that initial explosion, like a goalkeeper diving from a standstill, or a striker needing that first step sand, might be the magic bullet.
It certainly seems to target that specific quality. But the benefits didn't stop at just one jump. We also need to talk about fatigue resistance.
The fatigue index. This is my favorite stat because it basically measures how quickly you crash and burn.
Essentially, yes. In the repeated sprint test, they measure your peak power on the first sprint and your minimum power on the last one. The drop-off between them is your fatigue index.
And what did the sand do?
The sand group had superior improvements in maintaining power. Their minimum power, so how much juice they had left in the tank on that final sprint, was significantly higher than the grass group after the training.
So both groups got faster, but the sand group got tougher. They faded less.
You could say that. Training on that unstable, energy-sapping surface forced them to work harder to maintain speed. So when they went back to the firm grass for testing, their bodies were essentially over-prepared for the fatigue. They built a bigger engine for resisting that power drop-off.
That is a huge advantage in soccer. The game is often won in the last 10 minutes. If I'm still powerful in the 85th minute and you're fading, I'm going to beat you to that ball.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the physiological side of things,
Yeah.
because this is where the study threw a bit of a curveball.
Yeah, I noted this. I assumed that because running on sand feels so much harder, that the internal markers like heart rate and lactate would be through the roof compared to grass.
That is the logical assumption. But in this specific study, the researchers found that the internal load was statistically identical between the groups.
Wait, really? Identical?
Yes, they measured maximum heart rate, blood lactate levels, and RPE, which is the rating of perceived exertion. No significant difference.
How is that even possible? If sand is absorbing all your energy, shouldn't your heart rate be higher to compensate for it?
It's a great question. The authors suggest a couple of things. One is that the sprint protocol itself, that max effort with short rest, is such a potent stimulus that it just maxes out the cardiovascular system regardless of the surface.
So you're redlining the engine whether you're on the highway or a dirt road.
Exactly. But there's also velocity. As you get faster on grass, you're moving your limbs at much higher speeds. That high turnover rate has its own metabolic cost.
Ah, I see. So on sand, you're fighting the resistance of the ground. On grass, you're fighting the speed of your own limbs. The effort balances out.
Precisely. The sand group was working hard against the ground. That's a muscular force problem. The grass group was working hard against speed, a neuromuscular velocity problem. The net result on the heart and lungs ended up being the same.
So what did this mean for their aerobic fitness? Did they get fitter?
They did. Both the sand and grass groups saw significant improvements in VO2 max, about a 7.3% increase, and their anaerobic threshold.
And was one better than the other for that?
No. There was no significant difference between the surfaces for aerobic gains. And this is a key takeaway for you listening. High-intensity sprinting improves your cardio, period.
The ground you run on doesn't seem to matter as much for the lungs as it does for the legs.
That's a great way to put it.
What about running economy? Did that change?
It did improve in both groups, probably because they just got stronger and their technique get tighter. But again, neither surface held a distinct advantage there.
Okay, let's zoom out. We have this data. Sand makes you jump higher from a standstill and keeps you from getting tired as fast. Grass is stiffer and lets you run faster. Physiological stress is about the same.
Correct.
So if I'm a coach or just an athlete listening, what do I do with this? Sounds like sand is just better, right? Should we all just ditch the grass training?
It is tempting to think that, but we have to look at the nuance. The study showed that while sand built that great concentric power, it didn't improve peak power or top speed any more than grass did.
Right. You can't practice running at 35 kilometers per hour if the sand is physically slowing you down to 25.
Exactly. To run fast, you have to practice running fast. You need that stiff surface to train the nervous system to fire at those absolute top speeds and to use that elastic energy.
You risk detraining the stretch shortening cycle if you only ever run on sand.
Yes. You might feel powerful but flat when you get back on the pitch.
So we're back to the hybrid solution. It's not one or the other.
We are. The authors recommend a periodized approach. That means mixing and matching based on the time of year.
Okay, walk me through that. Let's say it's preseason.
Preseason is perfect for sand. You're trying to build the base, the engine, and the raw leg strength. Plus, and we haven't touched on this much, sand reduces the shock on your joints.
Oh, that's huge. Soccer players are always dealing with shin splints and knee issues from the pounding.
Right. The impact forces on sand are significantly lower.
Okay.
So using sand in the preseason lets you get that high-intensity stimulus and that concentric muscle building with much less pounding on the ankles and knees. It's high reward, lower risk.
And then as the season gets closer,
You transition back to grass. You have to prepare the body for the actual match surface. You need to optimize that neuromuscular timing, the bounce, the stiffness, the top-end speed mechanics. You can't play the game on sand mechanics.
it's like taking the weights off a baseball bat. You train heavy on the sand to build the power, then you switch to the game bat, the grass, to get the speed back.
That is a very apt analogy. The sand builds the horsepower. The grass tunes the transmission to actually use that speed on the pitch.
I want to circle back to one thing, though. The study said the internal load was the same.
Yes.
Does that mean that if I just hate the feeling of sand, if I hate that heavy-legged feeling, I can skip it and get the same cardio workout on grass?
For pure cardiovascular health,
Yeah.
yes. If your goal is strictly VO2 max and burning calories, this study suggests you can achieve that on grass just as well, provided you're sprinting at max effort. But you are leaving those specific muscular adaptations on the table. You won't get that same concentric power boost, and you might not get that same improvement in local muscle endurance. that ability for the legs to just keep firing.
It's the difference between being heart healthy and being performance ready.
Precisely. And there's one other thing on this quad jump. The authors also talk about muscle activation and stability.
Right, because you're running on a moving surface.
Exactly. Previous studies have shown that running on sand increases the activation of your hip and trunk stabilizers. Because the ground is shifting, your core and hips have to work overtime just to keep you upright.
So it's a hidden core workout?
In a way, yes. And stronger hips and a more stable core transfer very well to vertical jumping. If your energy leaks out through a weak core, you don't jump as high. Sand forces you to plug those leaks.
I love that visual. Plugging the energy leaks. It sounds like constraint-led training. The environment itself forces you to do it right.
It does. But it leaves us with this lingering thought, The study notes that peak power and top speed didn't differ. It just suggests that while sand builds the engine, you really do still need that firm ground to practice reaching your absolute top speed.
Specificity still matters. You are what you train on.
At the end of the day, yes. If you want to be a beach sprinter, train on the beach. If you want to be a grass sprinter, you need the grass. If you want to be a complete athlete.
You probably need both. Build the beast on sand, let it loose on grass.
I like that. That's good.
I might put that on a t-shirt. This has been a really enlightening look at something as simple as the ground beneath our feet.
It really has.
We often overlook the simplest variables in favor of fancy shoes or supplements. But sometimes just changing the dote you run on can fundamentally alter your physiology.
And thanks to Jan, Zhai, and the team, we have the data to use this variable intelligently.
So here is the takeaway for you listening at home. If you have access to a sand pit or a beach or even a soft trail, don't shy away from it. Incorporating some of those sluggish, heavy-legged sprints into your routine might be the secret to unlocking that extra inch on your vertical jump.
Embrace the suck. Just remember to transition back to firm ground before race day or match day. You want your nervous system to remember what it feels like to fly.
Good advice. And hey, if you want to see the nitty-gritty details, the statistical breakdowns, and the full biomechanical analysis, we highly recommend you read the full article.
Again, that is Comparative Effects of Sand and Grass-Based Repeated Sprint Training by Jan et al. In the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. It is a really robust piece of work.
Make sure you are following our channel so you don't miss the next deep dive. We have some great topics coming up on recovery modalities, ice baths versus heat that you won't want to miss.
Turn on those notifications.
Until next time, keep learning and maybe go find some sand to run in.